Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen. Well, this is a very pleasant surprise. It's a great honor, that goes without saying, but more importantly, it's a most unexpected honor. And it's the unexpected that I want to talk about this morning. Some years ago, an MP called Geoffrey Dickens was attending a fete in his constituency. Wherever he went, at every stall he stopped, he was closely followed, according to The Observer, by, quote, a devoted, smiling woman of indescribable ugliness. Try as he might, he couldn't get away from her. A few days later, he received a letter from a constituent saying how much she admired him, had met him at a fete, and asking for a signed photograph. After her name, written in brackets, was the apt description, horseface. I've misjudged this woman, thought Mr. Dickens. Not only is she aware of her physical repulsiveness, she turns it to her advantage. A photo is not enough, he thought, so he went out and he bought a plastic frame to put the photo in, and on the photograph he wrote with a flourish, to Horseface, with best wishes from Geoffrey Dickens, MP. After it had been sent off, his secretary said to him, did you get that letter from the woman at the fete? I wrote Horseface after her name so you'd remember who she was. Now, I understand it's traditional on these occasions for people in my position, i.e. up here wearing a silly hat, to give some advice to young people like yourselves starting out on life's great journey. And my first piece of advice is this: never ever write Horseface on a photograph. Mark my words well and remember them, because I'm about to become an advice guru. Last week, the Daily Telegraph called me up and asked me if I could write a piece on the best piece of advice I've ever been given. I said yes, but I'm struggling a bit because I actually can't remember being given any good advice. The only thing I can remember is when I was about 14, there was a prefect in my school called Thistlethwaite, improbably enough. Lloyd, he said, don't worry so much. Now, that really is good advice. It put more elegantly by Mark Twain, who was mentioned earlier, who said, I'm an old man now and have known a great many troubles, but most of them have never happened. Even more perceptively, he also said, the man who can remember what he worried about last week has an exceptional memory. So don't worry, that's the first thing, it's futile. What happens will not be what you expect. My second piece of advice is from Oscar Wilde. The only thing to do with good advice is to pass it on. It's never of any use to oneself. It's true, being told not to worry by Thistlethwaite had absolutely no effect on me whatsoever. In fact, I've been worried sick about almost everything for the following 47 years, particularly about the fact that I worry so much. But there you are. I'm sure plenty of sensible things have been said to me over the years, but the one thing about good advice is that people give it all the time, but nobody ever hears it. So here are a few things I've worked out for myself that won't be any use to you, but you may like to pass on. Firstly, in the words of the great Chinese sage and contemporary of Confucius, Chuang Tzu, do not make plans. There's no point. The universe is built on surprise from the rather improbable Big Bang onwards. Secondly, on a more positive note, I recommend this tip from the pioneering Victorian photographer Julia Margaret Cameron, who photographed Tennyson and all sorts of other people. And she said, leap and the net will appear. The trick is to live spontaneously, surprise yourself. The universe is a teaching machine, and if you don't do it first, it will do it for you, probably in rather alarming ways. So take chances. Always go to the party. You never know who'll be there and what may happen. But as Kipling said in his great poem, If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these two impostors just the same. So don't do what they tell you to do what you want. It's much easier to get what you want than to know what you want, and that's what you have to find out. And above all, don't listen to anyone else's advice. Many years ago, my friend Greg, who had the room next door to me in our first university, got married. He was by then a successful merchant banker, and I went to his rather smart wedding in Holland. There, I was introduced to one of his many impossibly sexy and elegant lady guests, who I seem to remember was a member of the Hambro banking dynasty, or maybe she was a Guinness. She certainly had a big head on her. John Lloyd, she said, but weren't you an absolute nobody at Cambridge? It's true, I was an absolute nobody. I was a lawyer, a very, very bad lawyer at that. And when I got the worst third in the history of the law faculty, my tutor wrote me a note of congratulations saying how astonishing it was that anyone who'd done so little work had managed to get a degree at all. And no one was more surprised than I was. But university did this for me. It stoked my sense of curiosity. Until I started QI in the 90s, I'd never had such riveting conversations. They gave me the unquenchable sense that absolutely anything is possible. Given that I've worked with some of the most famous people in the world, I suppose, Rowan Atkinson, Ben Elton, Stephen Fry, Richard Curtis, Hugh Laurie, Pink Floyd, Monty Python, in my own circle, I'm still pretty much a nobody, even though due to an obscure anomaly that I can explain later, I've actually won more BAFTA awards than anyone in the world except Dame Judi Dench. But I say this to you now, as sincerely as I can, that none of that matters. As Henry Mitchell, the great American gardener and author of The Essential Earthman, said, all anybody needs to know about prizes is that Mozart never won one. It doesn't matter what people think or what your Who's Who entry is like. It's important to do what's right. I commend to you my favorite word in the English language, autotelic. It means worth doing for its own sake. So do your work by all means, but more importantly, find your work. That's what happened to me at college as a result of my exasperated tutor's relentless teasing. It was there I found that I was never going to be a lawyer, but what I was really good at was writing jokes. When I wasn't being the butt of his, that is. My university education gave me the precious time to find out what I was uniquely fitted for. As Thomas Carlyle said, blessed be he who has found his work. Let him ask no other blessedness. But there is one other blessedness, actually, which is just as important as finding your work, and that is finding your friends. I only had 3 friends at school. One of them I've never seen since, and one of them, sadly, is dead. University is where I made my lifelong friends, several of them in the first 24 hours I was there. So do your work, find your work, but always make time for your friends. As the founder and producer of QI, I've spent the last 10 years staring at the universe in all its mad, surprising glory. One of the most surprising things about the universe is that it's fractal, in that the closer you look at it, the more interesting it becomes. Rarely does a day go by when we fail to find an answer to a really difficult question, but after all the searching, I've decided there are really only 2 questions that matter. And they are, why are we here? And what should we do about it while we are? Now, I don't have the answers yet, but I do have partial answers. The first possibly from the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, like me, an alumnus of Trinity College, Cambridge, but unlike me, an Austrian and a propeller designer, who said, I don't know why we are here, but I'm pretty sure it's not in order to enjoy ourselves. And the elegant response to that is from one of my favorite poets, the great W.H. Auden, who was fond of saying, we are here on earth to do good to others. What the others are here for, I've no idea. What the others are here for, I've come to the conclusion, is for fun. They are surprise generators. For example, my old friend Dave Trott is now a famous ad man. Those of you who've been studying advertising will have heard of him. But he was once an unregarded junior art director. In 1971, a book called The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty came out. If you haven't seen the 1973 movie, it's about demonic possession, and it's very, very dark. In 1972, Dave's boss was reading the book at work, and he loathed it. He absolutely hated it. This is absolutely vile, he said, gross and disgusting. And he lived in Brighton, this guy, and he said, when I go home at the weekend, I'm going to take this book, The Exorcist, this vile, disgusting book, and I'm going to walk down to the end of Brighton Pier, and I'm going to throw this book into the sea as far as I can. So on Saturday, that's what he did. He went down to the end of Brighton Pier and threw it as far as he could into the sea. On the same Saturday, my friend Dave went to W.H. Smith and bought another copy of The Exorcist. On Sunday, he put it in the bath and ran it under the tap. And on Monday, he got into the office early and put it in his boss's desk drawer. So there's another piece of good advice. It pays to get into the office before anyone else. And I'd like to end on one other tale of the unexpected. The youngest graduate that we employ as a researcher at QI is called Anne, and she has a friend who is a vet at the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals in Belfast. Anne was talking to a friend the other day, and he told her that because the PDSA is a free service, their most frequent customers and the ones who cause most of the trouble fall into two categories. One, little old ladies who worry far too much about their beloved kittens, and rough types who own pit bull terriers and the like, who don't see why they should pay for anything. The other day, Anne's friend, the vet, got a call from a member of the public saying that they were concerned that their Rottweiler puppy wasn't growing properly. With a heavy heart, the vet said, "Okay, bring it in, we'll have a look." After a brief examination of the animal, he said, "I don't know how to break this to you, but your Rottweiler puppy is in fact a guinea pig." As Niels Bohr, founder of quantum mechanics, used to say, predictions are very difficult, especially about the future. So do not make plans, don't worry, and expect the unexpected. Leap, and the net will appear. Thank you very much.